podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in Puerto Rico remains life-threatening as Americans on the island continue to struggle to get medical care and critical supplies. National Nurses United RN Kathy Kennedy is volunteering in Puerto Rico with the union's RN Emergency Response Network.
We have a health care crisis right now, right here in Puerto Rico. We have been going into communities where all they ask for is water and food. I mean, you have to make a decision as to, okay, who's going to get the food today and the water? We shouldn't have to do that. The United States is the richest nation in the world. Puerto Rico is part of the United States.
SEIU union doctor Dr. Jen Packard says what's unfolding is a man-made crisis, a failure to get enough help in quick enough.
I'm hearing a lot of word from my colleagues in the field that they're seeing people who haven't eaten for 3 days. A lot of them are old people who didn't want to leave, didn't want to evacuate. They're very proud people. They don't ask for handouts. They will always say, go check on my neighbor. I'm worried about my neighbor. And we would ask, how are you doing? Do you have food? Do you have water? And when we ask very specific questions, we find out that their next food shipment might not be coming in until a week later. There was another team that saw an elderly person who was being abused by their caretakers. And when the team went to check on her, she had already written a suicide note.
Florida is doing a state constitution revision, and SEIU wants to make sure that the top priorities of working people are included in any constitutional changes. Proposed constitutional amendments will be on the Florida ballot in 2018. Monica Russo, president of SEIU Florida, says among top worker priorities for constitutional changes are a higher minimum wage, housing affordability, real affordable health care, and a better justice system. SEIU says workers in Florida are burdened by housing costs, continuing cuts to public education, disappearing access to quality health care, vast income inequality, and antiquated laws that criminalize poverty. SEIU says these are all structural issues that can be addressed by pro-worker state constitutional changes. Chicago Teachers Union President Karen Lewis says she suffered a slight stroke last week as she recovers from brain cancer. In a written statement, Lewis says the stroke was so minor that doctors could barely see it. On her initial examination, she says she is feeling pretty good. She called the stroke a minor setback in her recovery from brain cancer and will be back on her feet soon. And Lewis says once she's back to 100% health, she will be giving hell to the usual suspects in her work for the union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Wow, what a report yesterday. And look, after all of what we've seen out of Donald Trump, anybody surprised? It's with such a flippant attitude, such a dismissive attitude almost of, hey, that's what he signed up for. I know it hurts, but, hey, that's what. Really? I mean, that's the best you can come up with. And look, part of my problem with this guy. Now, I know during the campaign, people were telling me, Rick, don't worry about it. He's an executive. He will make decisions based on what people bring him. He will rely on the best people. And they will bring him the best information. And he will, as a CEO, he will make the choices based on what's in front of him. Has anyone seen that yet? I mean, honestly and truthfully, I mean, if you look at the decisions, if you will, do you think any of them were options that a really smart person brought to him and said, gee, I think what you should do, I think you should tell a grieving widow, hey, that's what you signed up for. And the reality is, no, that's not what people sign up for, especially poor people. Poor people sign up for educational opportunity. They sign up for, at least, when I grew up, when I was a kid growing up in the projects, there were only a handful of ways of getting out. There were only a handful of ways of people's lives getting better. Just a handful. And the military was one of them. As I remember, and again, I go back to this, the military was one way. If you were a really good athlete, you could go on to college and maybe get a degree. Sadly, most people who went that route were back in a very short period of time. You got a good paying union job that you worked hard at, and you were able to move up and out. I go back to those days and I think about those folks didn't sign up knowing or thinking, you know what, this is going to cost me my life. I mean, it's just, I got to be honest. I sat and I watched the coverage yesterday of Trump's comment and just struck, dumbfounded, speechless, whatever. When you stop and you think about, how low can you go? How far down in the depths of depravity can you get? How much worse can it be? I don't know that is this the low? Have we hit rock bottom? I know, look, I know my alcoholic friends are saying, sometimes you just got to hit rock bottom and then you make your way back up. Is this, can we hopefully, say this is rock bottom, have an intervention? Can we break out the sign? Can we have an intervention at some point and say, this is not okay. This is not normal. And then, with all of the other insanity in this, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me. And the fact that, to help prove his point, he pulls in his chief of staff, John Kelly, who lost a child, 7 years ago as well. And, you go, explain to me why what wheels were spinning between those orange ears? What thought process? And again, you go, wow, maybe you're blowing this out of, no, this isn't being blown out of proportion. Because look, this is 4 soldiers that it took him how long to even mention? How long did it take him to send a letter? Well, he sent the letter a day after someone made a big deal about it. What happens, and this is the other question I keep coming back to, what happens when he gets what he wants, which is conflict all around the world, and you're ending up with not just 4 soldiers coming back in coffins, but 40 or 400 or 4,000? How does he deal with that? And honestly, I'm lost at what it is that really, I mean, it's rare that I'm at a loss for words. But this, I mean, I sat there and I watched this congresswoman explain that, she's in the limousine, and the sergeant who's holding the phone, won't let her talk to the president. It's only for the widow. And you go, okay, and you're hearing all this stuff. How do you sit by and you not lose your mind? And good on her for bringing it to light. But now what's happened is we're magnifying the grieving process for this woman and her family, and for all of the families. The image, and I tweeted out this morning, is it me or is it wrong to send that image of that woman in her grieving process, draped over the coffin? Is why do we do that? I mean, is our insatiable appetite for misery, is that what makes us, or what makes them throw that in front of us? Is there nothing private? Is there nothing tasteful anymore? Because I got to be honest, I find it distasteful. I am curious your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. I mean, as I watch this, and I know that, during the Bush years, people wanted the caskets, the images of the caskets coming back to make people aware. And I kind of get that. And I understand that, you want, the image is powerful. And I understand that, they're iconic images that, for generations will be something that will be looked back on. But those moments, those personal moments, I don't know. I don't know. I think I would want my privacy. And I feel for this woman, and I feel for the families. We certainly with this president have not done nearly enough. And I fear for the next. And look, at the end of it, and later in the program, we're going to talk with Will Fisher from Vote Vets. What is this going to tell? What message does this send for the future soldiers who may die in service to the country? What does it say to their families? What is, I often say, what if we treat the people we call heroes poorly today, who's going to be the next generation of heroes? Who's going to be the next person who's going to run into a burning building, or run into a pile of rubble like 9/11 to try and save people, or serve in the military? If this is the treatment, and look, all the other stuff you can, almost everything else Trump has done to this point, you can go, he's just a buffoon. This, unforgivable. If this is completely accurate, unforgivable. That's it. I mean, and look, if you look at the policies that they're pushing, this is not going to be the end. If you look at the lack of diplomacy and the mixed diplomacy, and the fact that you've got a sitting president who, for all intent and purposes, is just nuts. I mean, there's no thought process here, I don't think. I think it's whatever. And look, when this report came out, he lashed out. First response is lashing out. So I'm curious your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. is who he is. And as the quote. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Again, with the computer. And again, you just go, here I thought music was playing. Nothing. And I've got a hammer. I've got a really big hammer. And it's one of those things. Anyway, one of the things I talk about quite often is, the need to, and if you think Trump has, just hit the base of insanity, the forward part of this, in my view, is, hey, how do we get people into positions of power who are going to run for office, who are going to hold accountable this president and hold accountable the policies and really do the will of we the people. And I've been saying this for a very long time. We need actual people to run for office, folks who are going to step forward, step up, and understand what it's like to go to work, bust your behind, and still end up behind at the end of the week. What it's like to send your kids to schools that are underfunded. What it's like to, at the end of the week, not be able to make ends meet, which is why I'm so thrilled that Mike Crossy is running as a Democrat in the 18th Congressional District. Now that Murphy is resigning at the end of the month, it would be great to have a good, decent, hardworking person in that position, and that's why I've asked Mike Crossy to come talk with us. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you, and thank you for that fantastic introduction. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Now, I got to tell you, I've been saying for a long time, we need, true working class heroes like yourself to step forward, step up, and move forward. And this is a great opportunity because, I look at someone like Murphy who, I don't know, I'm not putting him in that category of understanding what I go through on a daily basis.
And he didn't, and and it's an interesting race now that he's actually resigning at the end of the month. But I know I stepped up about 6 months ago and said, I was willing to debate him on working family issues, on his votes to take away our health care, his votes against children and students. And you look right now at the Congress, how dysfunctional it is. My God, they still haven't reauthorized the CHIP program, that provides health insurance to millions of children around this country. They still haven't done that. They're talking about putting gun silencers on people, and instead of worrying about trying to take care of health care issues and put working families to work in good-paying union jobs.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, you have the shooting, you have a mass shooting like that, and there's still the chance of silencers, and they still haven't, because it's my understanding they still haven't reauthorized the children's health insurance program at all.
You're right, they have not. And Trump and his administration, are still dismantling some of the protections that were put in place under the last administration. They have total disregard for the American middle class and the American working family. All they care about is lining their pockets and doing things like that. It's just abominable. And one of the reasons why he decided to run was not just Tim Murphy's abysmal record himself, but the fact that Congress has completely shirked its duties. I mean, one of the duties of Congress is oversight of the administration. And they have just fallen in line. They are afraid of Trump. And anytime any one of them, even a Republican, speaks out against something, he threatens them and toes them back in the line. And I got to tell you, I am not afraid of Trump. I'm not afraid to take on him or his administration. And I am more than looking forward to doing this battle.
We need people like you who are going to step forward. I mean, healthcare being front and center. Now, yes. I understand there's a bipartisan, half-baked plan to patch up what Trump has just done. I personally am a Medicare for All guy. I think at some point, right, rational, sane thought brings us to the idea that insurance is the larger the pool, the better. One big insurance pool to me seems sane. It seems rational. I'm curious where you are.
we're in the only country in the world that does not cover all of our people. Medicare for all works for me. I've had some people talk to me about, putting a public option onto the Affordable Care Plan, take it out of the hands of the insurance companies. The typical insurance company makes close to 20% administrative charges where they get their profits, and the people that run these huge insurance companies make millions of dollars on the backs of everybody else. Medicare charges a 1.9% administrative charge. We take that extra close to 18% and put it into health care. We can cover everybody. And, I think it's a simple, common sense solution. And I think that's what we ought to be exploring. That's what's written in my paperwork.
Yeah, simple, common sense solutions don't seem to be what comes out of Congress anymore, though, Mike.
No, it does not. It does not. And I think that goes to the point. One of my congressional reforms that we should do is we should stop them from Christmas treeing every bill that comes down the pike so that they could sneak things in they want or sneak in pork projects. Put an issue on the table. Let's vote on that issue. Tell the American people where you stand if you're a representative. And, don't put 50 different items into one bill so that people could say, congressmen can lie to the American people and say, well, I was with you on that issue, but this was also in the bill, so I couldn't vote for it. Let's do one issue at a time. Let's vote on one issue. Let's tell the American people where you stand, and let's move on and fix this country's problems instead of all the partisan bickering that they do down in Washington.
Yeah, I'm with you. The website, crossyforcongress.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can get some more information on Mike and maybe help out because these campaigns cost money. Now, You were a former union president, head of the Teachers Association here in Pennsylvania. So education has to be front and center. And I know it falls onto the states a lot, but I look at, what's coming out of the Department of Education. I look at what's coming out of Congress, and I got to be honest, I'm not all that thrilled.
Betsy DeVos is an absolute disaster as, Federal Secretary of Education. And that, again, was one of the points, that I beat Tim Murphy up on in the Republican Congress. When she proposed cutting public education funding $9.3 billion, not one Republican said, whoa, wait a minute. Education is the gateway to the future. That's how children move from, sometimes the depths of poverty to the middle class and above. Education is how we move forward in this country. And I believe it's one of the reasons why we're the freest, most productive country in the world is because when this country was founded, we said we are going to educate everybody. And if we don't do that, one, our children, when they grow up, can't be productive members in our economy. They can't be intelligent consumers in our political democracy because they don't have the skills. We have to make sure that we have the most educated population going so that, one, we hold our government accountable, two, people understand the government and are interested in participating in, and three, they can grow up and get a good union-paying job where they can support their families.
Now, all great stuff, but here's the thing. When you talk about education, it's not solely about K through 12. It's not solely about, kids getting out of high school, going into college. We're coming to an era in this country where change is going to happen so rapidly, and the need for continuing education is going to be so great that, and I don't even think we're talking about this on any level in this country, but the idea that, people in their 40s and 50s may have to go back to school, and there's got to be pathways for that as well. And I'm curious your thoughts on, and I know this is well down the road, but I'm curious your thoughts on it.
Well, you know what? We have to have a comprehensive education plan. And it doesn't just begin even at K. It's preschool learning. I wrote a women's and family issues paper that will be up on my website by the end of the week. And a part of that, one of the sections in there talks about comprehensive child care, where we have certified people helping. It's criminal, I think, that we have created a society that demands dual incomes in a family.
I agree.
Yet we provide no infrastructure for child care at all. pre-K, kindergarten, K through 12, and then after K through 12, my college affordability plan calls for, 50% reduction in tuition. I've got plans there to reduce student debt. That plan is already up on my website for people to see. I not only, lay out my thoughts on college funding, but that includes technical school funding and technical, and how do we get people to move into the digital age too, because that is becoming critically important.
Yep.
Right now, one of the things we opposed as when I was president of PSEA was the toxic testing that's required, and it's still based on the fact that, you stuff so much stuff into a kid's head, and then you see if they can regurgitate it out on a test.
Yep.
What we need to focus on now is teaching people how to be lifelong learners, because 50% of the jobs that my grandchildren are going to be looking at when they get out of school don't even exist yet today. So it's not just learning more and more stuff. It's learning how to learn. And that's going to be critical. You're right. You and I could be facing another career change down the road. How do we get skilled for that? Our community colleges are critically important as we go forward. People in some of the industries that get phased out need to be trained to move into new industries. The coal mining industry, needs to make sure that, as coal mines, lose less and less impact to solar and wind, how do we train those great workers in our coal mines and make sure that they can move into union jobs in solar and wind power? Those are all critical things that we're not doing now that we should be doing.
No, absolutely, but this comes down to having a comprehensive conversation. It's in a world where we are right now, where we just shout platitudes past each other. It doesn't seem like we're able right now to have that conversation, which is why I think we start with Congress. I think we have to have people in those positions who are willing to talk with other people. I mean, I'm disheartened a lot of the times by the fact that there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of reaching across the aisle.
Right. You're right. And I think that is absolutely critical. They've drawn the lines there, and if it comes out of a Democrat's mouth, the Republicans won't look at it. If it comes out of a Republican, we've got some moderates, but if it comes out of the typical Paul Ryan side of the house, the Democrats know that it's going to threaten working families. One of the things I'm most proud of is when I left PSEA and retired from that position because of term limits, I received a proclamation from the state house that was sponsored by a Republican representative and a Democratic state representative. And basically what it said was, you did this right. You tried to work issues. You didn't care what the label was. It was the issue that was important, and are we taking care of working families? And, and I think that's the approach I'll try to take when I get into Washington. I certainly won't compromise on my principles, but my ego won't be involved. What will be important to me is, are we doing what's right for the American people? And I think to your position where we need to not just be out there stalking platitudes, I think I'm the only candidate in this race on either the Democratic or Republican side that's actually publishing position papers. And I've got, I think there's 6 up on my website now. I have 2 more coming up at the end of the week, my women's and family issues statement and my position paper on seniors and issues that affect seniors the most.
Good stuff. And the website, again, crosseforcongress.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com, how people can check that out. I understand, this is going to be a special election at some point in the near future, right?
Yes. We just heard yesterday that the special election, the nominee on the Democratic side, is going to be chosen on November the 19th by the Democratic committee members in the 18th Congressional District. At that point, we'll have a special election. The last time I spoke to Governor Tom Wolf, he said that it would probably be early to mid-March. I have not seen a final date yet for that. So we have the The Republicans choose by a different method. It's some kind of conferee method where they pick their candidate. So I'm not sure when they'll do theirs, but I imagine it'll be around the same time in November, so that both candidates on the Democratic and Republican sides have about the same amount of time to campaign for the March special. But then again, you turn around and you're also going to have the primary to pick a candidate for the full term that would start in January 19th. The special election will only fill the seat through the remainder of 18.
Right. But, and again, it seems like an awful lot of running for the position. But at the end of this, I'm glad to see Murphy out. I think the issue that, and again, this is one of these things where you have someone who is staunchly anti-abortion, staunchly anti-choice, choosing to kind of pressure someone into it. The hypocrisy, the irony, however you want to frame this, front and center. And, the issue still is one that has to be discussed. I'm personally, and you can say whatever you are, I'm not in favor of abortions, but I am pro-safety. So I think it has to be safe and legal, but rare, and do what we can to not get in those positions. But it can't be something that's relegated back to the back alleys, in my view.
Well, you're 100% right, and and people again they caution me and said, Mike, don't be so blatant with the positions. I have no problem saying that I stand 100% with Planned Parenthood. Again, I'm not pro-abortion, but I am pro-choice because I don't think that decision should be made by an employer, by a government official, by some politician. I think that decision should be made in privacy between a doctor and the woman, and they should consult whoever's most important to them as they make that very private decision. I look at Planned Parenthood, and everybody beats up Planned Parenthood, and they go, "Oh, they cause all these abortions." 96% of what Planned Parenthood does is women's health care that has nothing to do with the abortion debate. This whole thing to defund Planned Parenthood and take money away from family planning centers is absolutely absurd. When I get in, I will work very hard to make sure that women's issues are taken care of. Women's issues should be a proactive approach. How do we take care of, people who work hard in our society yet get paid 77 cents for every dollar a man makes? I've written a plan that talks about, the economic security of women, the healthcare security of women, and the retirement security of women and families. Like I said, that was just sent to my proofreader yesterday. That'll be on my website within a week, and I'm looking very forward to having those debates as we move forward.
Yeah, I'm excited for you, Mike. I think this is a great time. I think you're the right guy at the right time. The website, crossyforcongress.com. Like I said, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com if I can check out Mike's website and the issues. And again, it is about the issues. Mike, best of luck. I'd love to have you back early and often. Please keep us up to date what you're doing.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate your time and appreciate your listeners listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Always good stuff. Mike Crossy again. The website, crossyforcongress.com. Highly suggest checking it out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
You can really feel the sheer power of a failure.
Record-breaking hurricane batters Ireland. Yes, Ireland.
A turning point as firefighters make significant progress.
Gaining ground against deadliest wildfires in California history. Desperate Puerto Ricans obtaining water from toxic Superfund sites. Plus,
today, tragedy knows no boundaries.
Search for a missing worker suspended after an oil rig explodes in Louisiana.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And I left Florida, and I left Louisiana, and I went to Puerto Rico, and I met with the president of the Virgin Islands.
Alexa, who is the president of the Virgin Islands?
The U.S. Virgin Islands president is Donald Trump.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Donald Trump held a 40-minute press conference in the Rose Garden on Monday. And with all of the assembled media there and all of the hurricanes we've had in the recent weeks and all of the fires, not one of those reporters could manage to ask Donald Trump about climate change and pulling out of the Paris Agreement. As much as Donald Trump seems to be failing, our national media continues to be failing all of us.
Yes, they are, but we won't. Fueled by an unusually warm Atlantic Ocean, Hurricane Ophelia reached Category 3 status on Saturday, breaking the record for the farthest east a major Atlantic hurricane has ever existed. Another record storm in a record Atlantic storm season. Ophelia's remnants smashed into Ireland on Monday.
Ireland.
As of airtime, killing at least 3 people, according to Ireland's national police. A recent study predicted that the warming Atlantic Ocean is putting Europe at risk for even more hurricanes. In Northern California, state fire officials say more than 11,000 firefighters from across the U.S., Canada, and Australia are gaining ground against catastrophic heat and wind-driven wildfires in the state's wine country. It's been the deadliest week of wildfires in California state history. As of airtime, the fires have killed at least 41 people. Nearly 100 people are still listed as missing. More than 5,700 buildings destroyed. Damages in Sonoma County alone are estimated to cost more than $3 billion. Smoke from the fires has generated the worst air quality in the Bay Area's history. It's estimated the fires have already released air pollution equivalent to that released by all of the state's cars in an entire year. Fighting the record Western wildfire season of 2017 has cost the federal government nearly $3 billion and has already surpassed the previous record set for firefighting in 2015. And this year's fire season is not over yet. In Portugal and Spain, officials over the weekend reported at least 34 people died in hundreds of wildfires that were whipped up by wind gusts from passing Hurricane Ophelia. And in Brazil, wildfires in the Amazon rainforest are nearing a new annual record as Brazil's dry seasons become even drier. Climate scientists warn that global warming is accelerating the speed of wildfires in California and elsewhere. According to UCLA climate scientist Daniel Swain in an interview with Climate Progress, quote, increasing temperature plays a significant role in making these fires more explosive and covering ground more quickly.
And yet, with all of that, not one single question about climate to the President of the United States in a 40-minute press conference.
In Puerto Rico, nearly a month after Hurricane Maria, 30% of Puerto Rico still lacks potable drinking water. The Washington Post reports that desperate residents have been forced to obtain drinking water from wells at toxic Superfund sites. Food shortages have been reported, but at the White House on Monday, President Trump again suggested that residents are to blame for that as well.
We have massive amounts of food, but they have to distribute the food, and they have to do this. They have to distribute the food to the people of the island. So what we've done is we now actually have military distributing food, something that really they shouldn't have to be doing.
So once again, everyone else but Donald Trump is to blame. Got it.
In Louisiana, unfortunately, Jefferson Parish officials have suspended the search for a missing rig worker after an explosion and fire that engulfed an oil and natural gas storage platform located in Lake Pontchartrain on Sunday. In addition to the missing worker, 7 others were injured, 3 critically. The cause is under investigation, and the state believes no oil was released. But in a separate incident, an oil pipeline rupture off the coast of Louisiana on Friday spilled an estimated 350,000 gallons of crude oil. Finally, some good news.
Took you long enough.
The Chinese government announced it has canceled 150 proposed new coal plants equal to the combined generating capacity of both Germany and Japan. And great news for breathers in Texas. Electric utility Luminant has announced it is closing 3 unprofitable coal plants in the state earlier than planned because of cheap natural gas and the glut of renewable energy.
Wow, Donald Trump's, Barack Obama's war on coal is really hurting these people. For much more on all of those stories, yeah, you worked that out, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
And breathe, just breathe. Oh, breathe.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thoughts are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, rain shed from red. Father, son, left a cameo, blue denim, head is vein. Oh, he's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Look, I was just checking out Mike Crossey's website, CrosseyForCongress.com. Some really thoughtful policy ideas. And it's what we need. The fact that you've got a Republican Party right now hell-bent on simply destroying things. They have a hammer. Let's just bust stuff up. Leads me to, you know what? We need thoughtful people who are caring, decent, and, well, understand the power of what government can do if operated properly. You know, I'm always struck by Republicans who vote for candidates who go, I'm going to restrain, I'm going to destroy, I'm going to drag them in the bathtub and drown that evil government. It's always amazed me. And I look at somebody like Mike and I go, you know, here's a guy who truly compassionate, caring, and someone who wants to be able to make a difference. And look, you know, I'm not calling all Republicans heartless, but you look at their policies, man. You look at what they've done. You look at Trump and the Republicans in this obsession with let's destroy Obamacare. And you go, you know, why not fix it? You know, what are the problems? Come to the table, tell me what the problems are. Let's fix them. Let's move forward. To me, that's the rational choice here. That's the sane part in this. Going, okay, what don't you like about it? I don't like the personal mandate. I don't like the fact that everyone has to be involved. Okay, well then what's your solution on making sure that people, one, are covered for when tragedy happens? Because it's going to. We're all going to get sick. At one point or another, we're all going to get sick. And how do we pay for when people do? What's the solution? Because understand, the Republicans used to be in the everybody should be involved camp. Personal responsibility was the mantra of the 90s. And yet now they're the party of freeloaders. They're the party of, hey, if we can get somebody else to pay for it, great. It's nuts to me. I mean, really, you got a problem with the Affordable Care Act? Tell me. Let's work on it. Just like we did with Medicare. You know, there were a lot of problems at the beginning. Didn't cover much. Didn't do much. And now it gives seniors the ability to retire with dignity and the security of having that health care that will follow them until the end days. I mean, it just seems bizarre to me. Now, I understand that the Senate Health Committee Chairman, Lamar Alexander, and Patty Murray on the committee as well have announced that they have reached kind of a deal to undo the damage that Trump's executive order would do. And they've figured out how they're going to patch the money that's been going to be taken away by Trump. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Anyway, got to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. 15 countries were elected to the UN Human Rights Council on Monday. The council was already under fire for having Saudi Arabia, Egypt, China, and Cuba as members, and Monday's election will only intensify criticism. 3 new members in particular are drawing scrutiny. Pakistan is notorious for using secret military courts to carry out executions and for failing to prevent rape and violence toward women. Qatar's economy is driven by a migrant labor industry that some say borders on slavery, with foreign workers seeing their passports confiscated and unable to escape exploitative terms of employment. But Lou Charbonneau, the UN director at Human Rights Watch, said the election of the Democratic Republic of the Congo was the most upsetting.
Discoveries of mass graves, which probably are largely due to government security forces, thousands of people killed over the last year just in the Kasai regions alone, not to mention the abuses linked to the delayed election and the crackdown on protests there.
The Trump administration has repeatedly said the Human Rights Council needs to deny membership to rights abusers. So how do countries like Pakistan or Congo keep on getting elected? The answer is a lack of competition. In 4 of the 5 geographic groups putting forth candidates for membership, only one, Asia, had more nominees than eventual winners.
We need to be able to block countries that are serial rights abusers, and you can't do it when they're handed on a silver platter a seat on the UN's premier human rights body.
As expected, Nikki Haley slammed Monday's election, saying the council, quote, cannot endure many more blows to its credibility before it's rendered absolutely meaningless. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. John sent me an email during the break saying, I cannot believe how bad this president has been. I can't believe what he said. And a whole bunch of expletives and a whole bunch of other things that I can't put on the air. And I think that's how a lot of people feel about the comments that are being attributed to Trump, to the widow. I mean, it's just, wow. Anyway, thanks for the email. Let's go to Washington, D.C. Ellen Ratner, Talk Media News. Ellen, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Well, it is quite astounding. As we used to say in mental health, he's like a leaky faucet. You can tighten him up and he still leaks.
But look, I mean, this is just plain crazy. I mean, this is, I never put the bar high, but this just seems to be, is this, as I asked earlier, and you do some of the drug counseling stuff, I think too. Is this rock bottom? I mean, can it get lower than this?
Well, anything can get lower. I mean, it's hard to believe that it can get lower, but it could actually. And so we'll just have to see if it does. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully we've hit the bottom. But, you can never tell. There are things that you and I haven't even thought of or anticipated that could easily happen. I mean, you have to be creative in your anticipation, and I don't think I'm that creative.
Yeah, but, I saw it, and I'm going, it's got to be, it's got to be, there's no way any compassionate, reasonable person would say something like that. But then the more I thought about it, I'm going,
But if you don't have connections with people, and clearly he doesn't even have connections with people in the White House, you're going to say stuff. You're going to be that leaky faucet. You're just going to say anything that comes in your mind with, as we say in the business, no filters.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now he claims, tweeted out this morning, he's got proof that he didn't say it.
Okay, well that means this call was recorded and we can get all his recordings.
Oh, okay.
Now, I just want to point out something that I just read about, and it's really quite shocking, and I know no news has covered it, but the New York Times did a story on it. They said Google places fake news ads on fact-checking sites. It's true. So what they've done is they've said, learn the truth about whatever, and they've put it on things like PolitiFact and one of the other fact-checking sites and Snopes. And if you click on it, then it takes you to one of the Google ad sites. I mean, how dare they put it on that kind of site, but they have.
That's amazing. But here's the thing: do you, and maybe it's just me, but do you pay attention to any of those Google ads?
No, I don't. But
and I got to wonder how effective are they? Because I deliberately ignore anything that I'm not looking for.
Well, I do too. But maybe you and I spend a lot of time on the internet, and we know to do that. Maybe other people don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. And at some point, there's got to. I'm a free speech guy. I believe you should have the right to free speech, but I don't think you should have the right to deliberately mislead, especially if you're Google. I mean, we've given them so much power. They've got so much market share. I mean, I don't know.
I don't disagree with you, and it's criminal in my view. It really is.
And while on the other side, they've dictated Alternet as fake news, and Alternet's lost about half of their readership over the last couple of weeks because Google decided arbitrarily that we're gonna crack down on fake news, Ellen, but we're gonna perpetrate.
They don't like the kind of news that Alternet does. That's why
they don't like the competition.
Call it fake, just like Donald Trump calls things fake.
Wow, just we got real problems, and the thing is we've got a major distraction every day. There's a major shiny thing every single day coming out of the White House, and it's just oh man, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to recently who said, you know what, I just give up.
Well, what's interesting, I got an email from somebody in South Sudan saying, why aren't you in contact with me? Is it me? Blah, 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 blah. And I wrote back to them, there's just every day it's a different piece of news, and It's impossible to keep up. And I can't be doing South Sudan and this at the same rate.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, my fear is, and every day I wake up and I go, this is not normal, this is not normal, this is not normal.
Right. Well, it's not normal. What can we say?
Yeah. So what else is going on? I understand there's
well, there's a lot going on, actually. So now we have a situation where the White House is promoting, of course, originally they were going to go along with this bipartisan health care bill. And now they're saying, well, we're not going to go along with it. So they obviously have changed their mind very, very quickly. And the bipartisan health care bill is really a bill that was made with the Tennessee senator, Lamar Alexander, who, as you remember, ran for president many years ago,
right,
and Patty Murray of Washington State. And it was considered really bipartisan, but now President Trump is against it. Now, we know people like Rand Paul, who's a physician, would be against it because he's against any government subsidies of any sort.
Right.
Okay, fine. What I don't know is whether it needs the 60 votes to get on that Senate floor or whether a simple majority can pass, and I don't think the parliamentarian has yet made that decision.
Right, but isn't the budget reconciliation thing, isn't that period over? Doesn't that have to wait until the next portion?
No, what they did is they did a continuing resolution after the 30th of September, which is when it turns into a pumpkin. So they've got 3 months. Now they could extend it again. That can easily happen.
All right. Yeah, so basically they don't have to then blow up the filibuster. They can just do the continuing thing. All right, I got it.
We think. Again, I want to wait till I see something from the parliamentarian.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And also till it is scored, in other words, costed out by the Congressional Budget Office.
Again, to me, the thought of, and there was a second where I almost gave Trump a little bit of credit earlier by saying that, the Murray and Alexander plan was, at least going to pay for some of the destruction that Trump had done with the executive order. Why can't we just sit down and fix this stuff? Evidently not.
Well, now also you have a judge in Hawaii who issued a 40-page document saying that the Trump travel ban, the third one, was illegal. It has been partially thrown out by a judge in Baltimore, but not totally. It sort of goes back to the Supreme Court ruling in June that people have got to have somebody here, et cetera. But it does uphold the ban on certain top people from Venezuela, which I have to say I don't disagree with, and some other countries. So it's hard to know. It's obviously going to go up to the appellate court and then maybe up to the Supreme Court.
All right.
Are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah?
I'm just, I'm processing, letting all this stuff just go.
There's a lot. I'll tell you, it is just to keep up with the news for me is a full-time job. It never used to be like this.
And I think that's the plan. The plan is eventually to wear you out, Ellen, send you into retirement.
Oh, I don't think
us.
I'm going to go into retirement, but I think we might be worn out.
Anything else going on? Any other distraction? Any other big stuff going on?
Well, there is a lot of other big stuff going on. And one, of course, event is what's going on in Raqqa. They're celebrating that ISIS is gone, but 90% of Raqqa is under control of the Syrian army, but 10% is not.
Right.
So they don't fully have control of Raqqa at this point.
Yeah, but
and the United States says that celebrations are too early.
A little premature, but still, Trump was very happy to say that he did it all alone.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then, of course, there's what he says that's military families, which I know you've been talking about.
Yeah, isn't that? I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, and the larger question I have is, look, the 4 soldiers who died is absolute tragedy. What happens if he gets his way and we end up with conflicts in North Korea and Iran and all this other stuff, and you're not talking about 4 soldiers, you're talking about 40 or 400 or 4,000.
I have no idea, but this is not. It does not portend well for the future, for sure.
Yeah, just absolutely insane. Ellen, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you.
Thank you.
Our good friend Ellen Ratner, Talk Media News Service. Check out their website, talkmedianews.com. Again, you go back to this stuff and all of the insanity, every day. And as she pointed out, look, it used to be, you could catch up on the news in a couple of hours. You could catch up on, all of the insanity and then just, a couple of hours. Read a newspaper, you'd get most of it. There is so much. And look, the analogy of drinking from a fire hose, that has been the entire 9 months of this administration. And not in a good way. Look, I would love nothing more if the fire hose were shooting out really good stuff. Like, hey, how do we make sure everyone gets an education? How do we make sure everyone gets health care? How do we make sure our infrastructure is being built in a sustainable way with good union labor and, down the line? How do we do the good stuff? It just seems everything takes us deeper and deeper and deeper into the ooze and divides us further and further into our ideological camps. I got a couple of emails, bashing me for my abortion statement. Look, I'm not pro-abortion. I'm pro-safety. And you go, wow, that's a nuance. And it is a nuance. At the end of the day, I'm not going to have one of these. Real quick, I go back to my mother. My mother had told me, and I remember these stories from being a kid, because I remember the 1970s when all this stuff was going on in the Supreme Court, because I was delivering newspapers at the time. When a lot of this, 74 is when Roe versus Wade went through the Supreme Court, and it was several years after that it was still in the news. And I remember my mother telling me the story of a friend of hers who had gone to Kentucky for a backroom abortion and ended up it being horribly botched, and she ended up dying from it. And just a couple of years ago, my grandmother had told me that a great grandmother had died from a botched self-abortion because it wasn't legal or available. I don't want that for my daughters. I don't want them to have an unwanted pregnancy, but if they choose that it's their choice, not mine, not anyone else's, it's theirs. And I want it to be safe and legal, which is why, again, I go back to I am pro-safety. And if that makes me pro-abortion, then I guess that's what it has to be if I have to choose a label, if I have to choose one of the sides. That simple. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in Puerto Rico remains life-threatening as Americans on the island continue to struggle to get medical care and critical supplies. National Nurses United RN Kathy Kennedy is volunteering in Puerto Rico with the union's RN Emergency Response Network.
We have a health care crisis right now, right here in Puerto Rico. We have been going into communities where all they ask for is water and food. I mean, you have to make a decision as to, okay, who's going to get the food today and the water? We shouldn't have to do that. The United States is the richest nation in the world. Puerto Rico is part of the United States.
SEIU union doctor Dr. Jen Packard says what's unfolding is a man-made crisis, a failure to get enough help in quick enough.
I'm hearing a lot of word from my colleagues in the field that they're seeing people who haven't eaten for 3 days. A lot of them are old people who didn't want to leave, didn't want to evacuate. They're very proud people. They don't ask for handouts. They will always say, go check on my neighbor. I'm worried about my neighbor. And we would ask, how are you doing? Do you have food? Do you have water? And when we ask very specific questions, we find out that their next food shipment might not be coming in until a week later. There was another team that saw an elderly person who was being abused by their caretakers. And when the team went to check on her, she had already written a suicide note.
Florida is doing a state constitution revision, and SEIU wants to make sure that the top priorities of working people are included in any constitutional changes. Proposed constitutional amendments will be on the Florida ballot in 2018. Monica Russo, president of SEIU Florida, says among top worker priorities for constitutional changes are a higher minimum wage, housing affordability, real affordable health care, and a better justice system. SEIU says workers in Florida are burdened by housing costs, continuing cuts to public education, disappearing access to quality health care, vast income inequality, and antiquated laws that criminalize poverty. SEIU says these are all structural issues that can be addressed by pro-worker state constitutional changes. Chicago Teachers Union President Karen Lewis says she suffered a slight stroke last week as she recovers from brain cancer. In a written statement, Lewis says the stroke was so minor that doctors could barely see it. On her initial examination, she says she is feeling pretty good. She called the stroke a minor setback in her recovery from brain cancer and will be back on her feet soon. And Lewis says once she's back to 100% health, she will be giving hell to the usual suspects in her work for the union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
If a bomb goes off, our wounded warriors, instead of losing their legs, their arms, worse, they're okay. They go for a little ride upward and they come down. The best stuff, all gone, taken by the enemy. Taken by the enemy. So we don't know who we're fighting for. We don't know how to fight anymore.
Yes. You know, just when I got to be honest, you know, I've said for a while, I don't know how much deeper, how much worse things can get, how insane this administration, how bad, how low do we set the bar? You know, and yesterday you just, another low. Can it go much lower? I don't know, but here to talk about yesterday's comments and to share his perspective, I've asked Will Fisher. He's the government relations person at Vote Vets. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you so much for having me on today.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I mean, I see this statement. I wasn't there. I didn't hear it, but I got to be honest. It sounds like something Donald Trump would say.
It does. And, I mean, it's shocking when you really take a moment to read the type of headlines that are coming out this morning, you know, along the lines of, Donald Trump disrespects Gold Star family again.
Right.
Or, you know, it's Donald Trump versus the Gold Star families part 2. Do I have any doubt in my mind that Donald Trump said what the family is now saying, he said, and disrespected them and or spoke to them in a way in which they felt disrespected. Of course I believe Donald Trump did that, because Donald Trump, going all the way back to the campaign, has shown himself time and time and time again to have not a modicum of decency in his body, no respect for anyone, and just a complete willingness to attack and vilify veterans and military families, whether it was attacking the Khan family after the DNC, whether it was calling into question John McCain's service during the war in Vietnam, or, look, on a legislative front, trying to do things like gut Medicaid, which nearly 2 million veterans rely on, and certainly Donald Trump has made it no secret of his plans to try to destroy and privatize our VA healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, and the clip I played at the beginning, the reason I chose it, that was during the campaign. We knew that this is who this guy was going to be. Or he says, you know what, they get wounded. In the past they used to die. Now worse yet, they're okay. And you go, what? What exact? So let me ask you the other side of this, because he's awkward. Is there a defense to say, he's awkward in these situations and he just misspoke? Is that a possible defense?
I don't think so, and I don't think that my friend Jason Kander was on TV and was asked a similar question last night, and he said, we can't continually lower the bar of what's acceptable for the President of the United States to do or say. At some point, we just say, you're bad at this. You're not good at being president. And quite frankly, Donald Trump, look, he's not good at being a human being, right? He's shown himself over his entire life to not be a person who wants to contribute anything positive to the world. He has, cheated and abused people his entire adult life and used the hard work of others to supposedly build a fortune. We don't know that.
I'd like the tax returns.
But we do know. Yeah, but we do know that, he exploits workers. We do know that he sexually assaults women. I mean, he's on tape bragging about that. And look, when it comes back to this veteran and military family issue, this is somebody going all the way back to who was, compared their sex life in the 80s to serving in combat during Vietnam. So, yeah, I mean, this is just another chapter, Brother Rick, in the large volume of Donald Trump reminding the world that not only is he a vile and vulgar person, but he is also unfit to be president of the United States, and he's certainly no commander-in-chief.
No, I'm with you on this. But here's the thing. And look, the 4 soldiers are dead. And it's a horrible tragedy. And what keeps popping into my mind, if this is how badly he botches, the death of 4 soldiers, what happens if he gets us where he wants into conflict with Iran and North Korea, where it's not just 4, it's 40, it's 400, it's 4,000. And then how do you ask those?
Rick, there are experts who are predicting that if there were, we were to go to war in North Korea, there would be 20,000 South Korea and American casualties per day at the beginning of that conflict. 20,000 per day. And yeah, you have Donald Trump, and I mean, that's sort of one of the things that I'm happy you're bringing up that I never want people to lose sight of is, yes, Donald Trump is vulgar. Donald Trump is gauche. Donald Trump is completely and utterly incompetent, emotionally incompetent, and morally bankrupt. But Donald Trump is also incredibly dangerous. This is someone who has sort of carte blanche access to deploying nuclear weapons. This is somebody who makes the world dangerous every single day.
Let me ask you the other side of this, Will. I mean, because, the comment, and I got to be honest, when I first saw the comment, I just out of reflex didn't believe it. And then I had to process it because it's so offensive that's what you signed up for. Yeah, it hurts, but that's what you signed up for. And I guess you could argue that there's ways of saying that are less bad. When you signed up and served in the Marine Corps, did you sign up knowing that, hey, this is what I signed up for?
No. I think the statistic is, look, for one, when I signed up before the attacks on September 11th. But take, for example, the war in Iraq. 1 out of every 5,000 troops who served in Iraq was killed in action. And when you make a comment like, well, that's what they signed up for, that's saying that your death didn't matter. When you're in a combat zone and somebody dies, somebody's killed, you go back and look at that if you're a leader, whether you're a fire team leader, a platoon sergeant, company commander, you name it. And you look at that situation and say, what did we do that resulted in that young woman or young man losing their life? And what could we do differently to make sure that more people aren't killed and wounded? You look at like the war in Iraq, right? I think we all were aware and remember when it seemed like people were getting killed by IEDs, improvised explosive devices, on a very regular basis. So what did the Bush administration do? And along with, leaders in the military, they came up with new tools designed to make sure that fewer people were going to be killed by improvised explosive devices, MRAPs, right? New types of vehicles. And when you say, that's what you signed up for, you're saying we're not intending to learn anything from this. We're not intending to ensure that the sacrifice, in this case, one's son, but certainly could be said about the one's daughter, is going to be, not going to be used to prevent other people being able to have to make those sacrifices. And I think that Donald Trump, due to his complete lack of knowledge of service, no one in his family has ever served. He talks about Rocket Man. I bet he wouldn't talk about Rocket Man if Ivanka or Donnie Jr. or Eric were stationed in the DMZ on the Korean Peninsula.
No, I've said, look, you want to start it? It's Ivanka and Donald Jr. and the other one and the one nobody ever talks about, and at 18, little Barron. All of them to the front lines first. You want to push this policy? To me, and all of the politicians, their kids should go first. But it brings me back to this idea, and this is the reason I brought up the comment of, who signs up for the military mostly in this country. And when I was a kid growing up in a housing project, that was one of the ways out of poverty. And, to have that kind of a comment, well, that's what you signed up for. No, that's not what most people signed up for. Most people that I know who signed up for opportunity at education, opportunity to make a better life. That's what they signed up for.
And an opportunity, and an opportunity to serve. Not to say, oh, I'm signing up to be killed, right? But to your point, look, the guy who was racked next to me at boot camp, Rick, the very first pair of new shoes he had ever had in his life were the boots that were issued to him at Parris Island, right? So, and look, you have, for example, this situation that we're talking about specifically. This is a young man who, was making the right decision, right? He was leading his life and serving his country. And I don't think Donald Trump knows his name. I don't think Donald Trump would have reached out to their family at all had he not been pressed by reporters.
I agree.
And I do think that Donald Trump said something as remarkably insensitive as the family of this fallen young man are saying he did.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't say have a good time, like he did to the family in Puerto Rico. But let me ask you this.
Or when he pinned on the Purple Heart at the young man at Walter Reed and he told him, congratulations.
Yeah. Or when he took the guy's Purple Heart and said, I always want one. So much here that's just insane. So the other question of this becomes, if this is how we treat people who we are calling heroes and putting on a pedestal, who's going to be the next person, Will, who's going to step forward?
Look, the chorus of people who are disgusted by Donald Trump grows every day. And what I think that, but right now, I mean, you know what I'm tired of seeing, though, Rick, are the elected officials who are going to come out now and say, oh, well, I was bothered by what he said, or I found what Donald Trump said or the way he acted to be disturbing. And then they leave it at that.
Yeah.
Look, if you find it that disturbing, do something about it.
Yep.
You have, I mean, these people talk as if they don't have the ability to make the world and America a better and a safer place by removing Donald Trump from office. They do have that power. So Bob Corker, Ben Sass, look, they can all go on Twitter and talk about how Donald Trump is this and Donald Trump is that. Well, you know what? I'm going to need more than tweets, gang.
I'm right there with you. Last question I've got for you, Will. Trump pulled his chief of staff, John Kelly, and his tragedy into this entire mess. Is there a moment at which Kelly and Mattis and the military people around him, rein him in? At some point, is there something here for them to be responsible over?
Well, certainly. But I would say specifically to the situation of Donald Trump bringing General Kelly's son and his death in Afghanistan into this, to General Kelly, I just simply say I'm sorry that Donald Trump thought that was an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, it's
in terms of legislation and policy. Yeah, look, if you're working with Donald Trump and it's in this administration, especially some of these who are, practicing a great deal more sycophancy than the others. Those who are truly just enabling Donald Trump and bootlicking. This is a scarlet letter that you will wear for the rest of your life. I know he may show up at the Emmys, but I'm not interested in what Sean Spicer ever has to say again. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I don't care what she has to say after she's through with this charade, this circus that she's working on. Mick Mulvaney, God hurts America. He wants to hurt people. I'm not interested in what these people have to say. And for as long as I live, if you were in the part of the Trump administration, I'm never going to forget it. And I don't think a lot of other people will either.
Well, I appreciate the time. I appreciate your input. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Hey, Brother Rick, thank you so much. And look, hey, everybody listening, if you want to learn more about boat bets, follow us on Twitter at boat bets. And, me personally, Will_C_Fisher. And check us out online at boatbets.org.
Good stuff. Will, thanks so much, man.
Take care.
Good stuff. And we'll get links at thericksmithshow.com. I highly suggest following Will on Twitter. One of the people that I most certainly follow as well. Quick break. Right back after this. So again, I go back to this, and I go back to this situation where, look, this president has again the worst possible decision making, the worst possible situation, and like I said with Will, I mean it's one of those things where, how do you get the next person? How do you get the next person who's willing to step forward? How do you get the next person who is going to, say, yeah, sign me up for that. Sign my family up for that. And, at the end of it, I look at Kelly, you would think that, John Kelly being who he is, and I mean, would have, at the beginning, sat him down and said, no, this isn't what you do. This isn't what you get away with. And again, you go back to that. It comes down to the resources. It comes down to this administration, this president has the ability to reach out to a general and say, hey, general, how would you suggest I deal with this? How would you suggest I contact this family? How would you suggest I handle this? That's what a thoughtful person would do. That's what someone with half a clue, half a brain, half a bit of intelligence would do. And yet it's not at all what they've done. And, it's mind-blowing to me that this is what they get away with. And yet here again, we've got, a president saying, hey, I've got proof, and making it worse. Just making this whole thing that much worse. It's mind-blowing to me. It really is. And, I keep coming back to, the fact that, this administration is just horribly inept. Horribly. I mean, really, is there any justification for this whatsoever? Honestly and truthfully, is there anything? Because I don't see it. I don't see the justification. I don't see how you can allow that to happen. I'm just mind blown. But there you go. Let's move along. Evidently, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, evidently he was on a Politico podcast where he is, basically it's doom. If we don't get our tax cuts, the economy's going to collapse. Stock market's going to collapse. We're going to have chaos if we don't get our tax cuts. Don't give us our pound of flesh. There's going to be pain and suffering. And I keep coming back to this tax scheme where you right now you have half of the country, about 52%, according to the most recent CNN poll. 52% of the people, and I'm kind of shocked at this, 52% are saying they're opposed to Trump's tax plan. 34% say that they're in favor of it. 8 and 10 Democrats against it, 7 and 10 Republicans. The independents, 50% opposed, 35% in favor, 14% that they don't have any information. They don't have an opinion. I don't care. I don't care one way or another. When you see that kind of polar divide, there's a problem. Because look, not every Republican voter is going to be the millionaire class. They're just not. Not every Republican voter is going to be in the 1%. And yet somehow, part of what the Republican Party has been able to do, what the Republican brand has been able to do, is to get people who are working every day, people who are struggling, who are angry and still struggling, to get them to go, you know what, I identify with the 1%. I identify with them and want them to get their tax breaks and want them to get, more. And look, you can't look at the tax scheme as it's been laid out so far. And we don't have all the details, but the framework is pretty simple. Going to lower the top marginal tax rates. Who does that benefit? That benefits the 1%. We're going to cut corporate taxes. Who does that benefit? That benefits the 1%. We're going to slash pass-through rates, so we're gonna encourage that. Who does that benefit? The 1%. And you just keep going down the list of we're going to do away with the estate tax. Who does that benefit? I wish it benefited me. And this is one of those things I've often said, and I guess it's just because I've worked my entire life so hard, and I've made reasonable money. I've never made upper strata cash, but I've done okay. Never made 6 figures. I would love to. I would love to earn 7 figures, and you know what? I'd be willing to pay the high tax rates. I would love to pay the 39.6% tax rate. That's insane. No, what it means is I'm making a ton of money. And yet, I guess if I were to get to that upper strata, if I were to get to that rarefied air, I would then go, no, I'm better than you and I want it all for me. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years who identify as Republicans who say, well, it's the rich people who pay all the taxes. And you go, yeah, dum-dum. It's because they've got all the money. Pretty reasonable to think about. I mean, even the Trump tax plan says, the first, I think it was like $12,000 or something. That's tax exempt. Because who can pay, how much are you going to pay in taxes when you're making $12,000 a year? Because I don't know about you. I don't know how someone lives on $12,000 a year. And yet you had a Republican candidate a couple of years, Mitt Romney, saying, those people don't pay any taxes. Yeah, because they don't have any money, man. To hear that, something like that coming from the head of Bain Capital, who made, millions of dollars destroying thousands of people's jobs and destroying thousands of people's lives. More for me. Hell with you. Really, again, offensive. But, as offensive as those comments were, still Romney's, miles ahead of Trump. And this tax scheme, again, I keep coming back to over and over again, where you go, at some point, do we not, as a country, wake up to the reality that, there's some crazy stuff going on here. And this administration, honestly, this administration is, nothing good's coming out of this. There's nothing good coming out of this tax plan. There's seriously not. Not for you, not for me, not for people who get up every day and work for a living. At some point, do we not say, hey, enough already? Do we not say, where are the real tax cuts? Because look, I saw something the other day that said, $4,000. And Trump regurgitated this during his speech in Harrisburg. $4,000. You're going to get $4,000. Average family get $4,000. And you go, really? How do you justify that? Because most of the studies that I've seen is if you're in the middle class, if you're, someone who's, working to try and make ends meet, trying to keep up, you're talking like $100, $150 a year. We're not talking 4,000. If it really were 4,000, and I said this the other day, if it really were $4,000 coming into people's pockets, I could be in favor of that. Because I know that's going to generate economic activity. I know that's going to create additional jobs. And then maybe that myth, because they love to tell us that, we're going to give all this tax dollars away. We're going to give it all away, and it's going to come back, tenfold. It's magic. It's all going to come back because of the magic of the market, the free market, the invisible hand market. And you go, wait a second. When has that worked? It hasn't. What's happened is we have given massive amounts of money to the wealthy. And in fact, I was just looking at the Forbes 400 to where now to be one of the blessed, to be one of the 400 wealthiest people in this country, you now have to be worth not $1 billion, but $2 billion. Which means if you have $1.99 billion, no list for you. You're left off. You're not in the heavy 400. I mean, stop and, let that sink in for a minute. And the fact that I can guarantee you that none of those 400 people get up and go punch a clock for somebody, work for a paycheck at the end of the week, and pay the tax rates that a working person swinging a hammer would pay. Because, their money, their income, well, that's not income. It's capital gains. And taxed at a completely different rate. So you go work hard, you play by the rules, you're fighting to get ahead, and, well, your money doesn't matter. You're taxed at a higher rate because you work. And yet I gamble on Wall Street. I have inheritance of, millions of dollars. No, that's something different. Just plain crazy. Just plain crazy in my view. And at some point, the reality is we've got to wake up to what's going on in this country around the tax issue. And now I understand, where I'm at in Pennsylvania, the state budget, you still, again, they passed the budget on time, just not so much a way of paying for it. Now, the House of Representatives evidently has passed through a scheme to pay for it, which, did we get, any shale money in there? Did we tax the Marcellus Shale? Did we close the Delaware loophole? Did we do anything that's going to bring revenue in to help us fix our structural deficit and make sure that every year we're not, searching the seat cushions or breaking open the kids' piggy banks with a hammer in the middle of the night? I don't know. Here to give us the idea is Mark Steer. He's the director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Mark, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure, Rick.
So am I getting this right? The House has passed something of a plan to pay the budget bills?
Yes, but get out your piggy bank because it's not enough.
So we're going to start smashing
the right
banks.
Kind of revenue. Yeah, that's right. There's no shale tax in that bill, although I'm told there might be a vote on one in the House Finance Committee today. There's no closing of the Delaware loophole, and of course they haven't adopted our fair share tax plan. There's a lot of one-time revenues. Big surprise. Raiding special funds, passing a gaming expansion bill is predicted in the future, as it has been so many times before. But that, again, is just one-time money. And then they want to raid the medical malpractice fund, as they proposed to do last year and were stopped from doing by the courts. So it's not a long-term solution, and it may not even be a good solution for this year.
Yeah, but I keep hearing people say to me, but Rick, we've got all this money that's just sitting idly on the sidelines. Come on, Mark, there's all this cash squirreled away all over the place. We could put that money to work.
Well, the House tried this one before. They passed that plan. The Senate said we don't believe you. The governor said we don't believe you. But they're not giving up.
So
they'd rather have budget fantasies than tax anyone, especially not the Marcellus Shale natural gas drillers who give them so much money in campaign contributions.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems awful a lot like a quid pro quo thing. We won't raise taxes on you if you just keep giving us more cash.
Yes, that is certainly what it looks like to us, because it's hard to understand how you can, on the one hand, say we don't want to tax working people in the middle class, and on the other hand, you won't tax natural gas drillers when 80% of the natural gas we sell in the state goes out of state. People in Pennsylvania are already paying a severance tax, a shale tax. They're just paying it to West Virginia, and they're paying it to Texas, and all the people in other states who are buying our natural gas, we're giving it to them without taxing.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I remember hearing Tom Wolf speak while he was running for governor, and he said it makes absolutely no sense that Alaska Pennsylvanians pay Alaska's taxes, but Alaska doesn't pay Pennsylvania's taxes because we get oil from Alaska and they have a tax on it and we all pay it, but Pennsylvania we're better than that, or dumber, Which it's either better or dumber. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
which.
I'd go with dumber, and I don't think most people are dumb. I think if you ask the person on the street, do they favor shale tax? Anyone who has the least bit of understanding on the issue will say, no, of course not. Now, there are a lot of people who Republicans and some Democrats and the natural gas drillers have convinced, if we raise this tax, you'll pay it. But that's just not true. And, sometimes we've got to fight through this fog of lies and deception and look at the truth of things. And the truth is, very few Pennsylvanians will pay this tax. And yet it could bring us a lot of money to fund things we care about without taxing ourselves. So where is the downside?
Yeah, it's just crazy. But from what I understand, didn't one of the House committees pass a piece of legislation that would make a severance tax? Now, granted, you're just changing the name of the old thing, but technically you have a severance tax, right?
No, they haven't passed that yet. Yes, okay. That was the Great Name Change Act of 2017.
But hey, it's something. It's at least a start in identifying the need for one. But here's the thing. I mean, you look at what's going on in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is just a small, example of what's going on the federal level as well. You have people who refuse to pass sane budgets and fund things. I mean, to me, sitting here at this moment, with the federal government not reauthorizing the children's health insurance program, to me is just downright criminal.
Yeah, it really is. And not passing a fix to Obamacare either, which it looks like the Senate may take a step towards, but they're letting Trump do some terrible things to the ACA and not standing up to him. And, people need to understand that at this point in this country, there really are two sides. There's one side that basically is looking to cut programs to benefit working people, education, healthcare, higher education, in order to cut taxes for the very rich. And there's another side that is trying to stop that and move in the other direction and to tax the 1%. So working people and middle-class people don't have to pay for programs that not only benefit themselves, but benefit the whole economy. Now, that's an oversimplified point of view, and I have to say, people on our side aren't perfect either, but that's the choice we face. And if you are a working person or a middle-class person, and you believe the stuff the other side tells you, that we're going to grow the economy by cutting taxes for business people, by ending corporate taxes, by not restoring the corporate taxes that we cut in Pennsylvania, by giving the rich big tax breaks. If you believe that, then, shame on you. But not just you, but because you're hurting all of us, because you bought a line of nonsense that just is not true, and you're taking the country down the tubes because you have belief that.
Yeah, that, and if you do believe it, let me know. I've got some bridges. I've got some swampland. I got tons of things to sell you.
That's right. That's basically what it comes down to. People are doing it to themselves. They need to go back and think about what this country looked like when we were taxing the rich more, when we were spending more money on education, when all these universities, most of it was built in the 50s and 60s, state university systems. And at that time, the economy was growing fast, incomes were rising, and they were rising in an equal way. And ever since we reversed directions, incomes have been rising only for the top, and it's been stagnant for everyone else.
No.
Now, you can't listen to people who say cutting taxes on business people is the way to go, because it's just not true. It's not what history teaches us.
Yeah, but we've been told that, look, Mark, the reality is we're the highest tax people in the world. Nobody's taxed higher than us, highest business taxes. Pennsylvania, one of the highest personal income tax rates, highest taxes. We're taxed higher than everybody.
Yeah. We should get a panel of someone from Sweden, France, and Germany, and Switzerland, and say, would any of you trade your taxes in your countries for the taxes you would pay in the United States? Not one would make that trade, as long as they could keep the services they get.
Right. No, and healthcare being one of the big ones, and I mean all this stuff, and it's amazing to me that we don't connect the dots, because all of this stuff is interrelated.
Yeah, it absolutely is. If you keep cutting taxes for the very rich, like we've done in Pennsylvania, we have had cut corporate taxes to such an extent that we're losing between $2 and $3 billion every single year. We would not have budget deficits. We would not have to even be talking about any taxes increases on working people of the middle class if we hadn't made those foolish corporate tax cuts. And we were promised the fastest growing economy, and instead what we find out is that Pennsylvania is growing slower than any other states around us.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's this fairy dust magical thinking that's always scared me. Because look, you go back to the Reagan era. We were told you cut taxes on businesses, on the wealthy. They know they're smart. They know what to do with it. It's going to create all this great. It's going to bring in tons of money, and it's going to be great. It's utopia. And we tried it, and it didn't work. And then we tried it again under Bush, and it didn't work. And now you've got Trump who goes, "Hey, let's try it again. This time, if we go far enough, Mark, if we slash things deep enough, it'll work. Maybe."
It's not going to work, and it hasn't worked on the state level. Louisiana tried it.
Kansas
tried it. We tried it in Pennsylvania. It does not work. We should be careful. It works for some people. If you're in the top 1%, it's working for you. Your taxes keep getting cut. Your income's going up faster. Wages are stagnant, so you don't have to pay working people more in your business. It's working for them. It's not working for the rest of the country. And you know what? I'm sure you, like me, get tired of saying this over and over again, but we just have to do it, and we have to ask everyone who's listening to us to keep saying it, because that's what they did on the other side. They took an argument that made no sense and repeated it over and over and over again until it became the conventional wisdom. We've got to change conventional wisdom, and there's no way to do it except by saying it over and over and over again.
Yeah, that and
You're tired.
That and the Koch brothers spend a bunch of money to spend in universities, and I look at Florida State where the story had gone, and I'm sure you've seen it. For a number of years, the Koch brothers gave $2 million to Florida State, a huge university where $2 million isn't even an awful lot of money. But for that $2 million, they actually got veto power over any economics professors hired. So when you're training the next generation of economists or the next kid who takes Economics 101 and you're teaching them that tax cuts creates jobs, that becomes conventional wisdom for the educated class, as well as the people who learned through osmosis of being constantly hammered through radio and TV and other messaging vehicles.
Yeah, it's true. But you know what? There are more of us than them. If we just need to get our heads on straight and see through this nonsense and just keep repeating it, because ultimately, we should be able to change the direction of this state in this country, but it's going to take a lot of work, and we can't count on billionaires giving us money to run television advertisements and buy university professors. We count on grassroots pressure, and we need people to be calling their state representatives and to be talking to one another. And you know something at work. In the last 2 weeks, we've been doing a campaign with some of our labor friends, particularly from SEIU. We have gotten thousands of letters and phone calls made to state representatives. We took people in the last 6 days to 12 different offices in Southeast PA. Yesterday, a group of folks showed up at the office of Robert Gottschall in Montgomery County. 10 people showed up. They called the police.
Wow.
We said, why'd you call the police? He said, we've never had 10 people show up before at our office. We didn't know what was going on. Nothing bad happened, but it was kind of funny. He's been in office since 1983, and he's never had 10 people come to his office say, do something. And they were there saying, pass the shale tax. Now, if we can keep replicating that, if we can keep getting people to come out, 10, 15 people at a time, and go to state representatives, it's making a difference. If this bill comes out of committee today, this shale tax bill, the only reason it will have come out is because of all the pressure we've been building at the grassroots for the last 3 or 4 weeks. It makes a difference. It does work. People need to be part of it.
I'm right there with you, and it's one of those things that the more we get involved, the louder we raise our voices. Maybe they'll start listening.
I think they will. I
go.
think we're going to see today that they're going to listen.
Good stuff, Mark. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
Good talking with you, Mark Steer, director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Check out their website, pbpc.org, the website. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. And he's right. At the end of it, what we have to do is what the right wing has done masterfully, and that is to repeat over and over and over and over and over and over again. Tax cuts do not create jobs. Sorry, tax cuts for the wealthy do not create jobs. Tax cuts for the wealthy do not create jobs. Come along with me. Tax cuts for the wealthy do not create jobs. Say it again. Tax cuts for the wealthy do not create jobs. Because look, and this is common sense, and we've said it 1,000 times, but maybe it's one of those things you just have to keep repeating. I go back to people I've had on this program over the years. A guy was a rich business guy, said, if you give me a tax cut, I'm going to have more money. And I go, yeah. He goes, I'm going to have more money. I go, yeah. And you're going to use it to create more jobs. He goes, no, I'm going to have more money. You give me customers. You give that money that you would have given me to people in the community where my business is, they're going to walk in my door. I want their money. I'm going to need someone to service their demand. I'm going to create jobs to get their money. You give me a tax cut, you just gave me money. I don't have to work for it. And they go, wait a second. Are you sure about that? Because we're told over and over again that you're the smart guy. You know what to do with that money. And that if we give you all these tax breaks, you're then going to, magic thinking, you're going to create jobs. Nope. Had a professor on not too long after that. who said, look, you give me a tax cut, I'm going to take a vacation. Have people walk through my door, I'm going to create jobs. That's the conventional thought. That's reality. And in fact, my uncle, who's a very wealthy guy, wants the tax cuts because, hey, he wants more money, but says, they're not effective in creating jobs. They're effective in giving me more money. They're not effective in creating jobs. You want to help my business? Build something. He's in electrical supply. Put a new highway in so I can provide the poles and the lights and the wiring. Put a new building in so I can do all the electrical fixtures and all the engineering that goes into all of that. That creates jobs. And we used to get this. I mean, if you really wanted to create jobs, if your goal was to really create jobs and get the economy moving, the first thing I would have done out of the box was very simple. And it used to be nonpartisan. I would have said, one, our electric grid is outdated. We shouldn't have one, big centralized electrical grid. We should be breaking these up. We should be using more renewable energies because, when storms hit, all kinds of stuff. We should be investing in the 21st century technology of energy. We should be investing in 21st century technology for infrastructure. Look, self-driving cars are coming. We know it. There's no stopping it. Self-driving trucks are coming. We know it. There's no stopping it. Put people to work building those infrastructures. That's going to create jobs. That's going to put money in people's pockets. Make sure that you follow Davis-Bacon. Make sure that people have decent wages. That creates jobs. But we're not doing that. We're just saying, no. Here, take the money. Take the money. And again, they're the producers that we're giving all this money to. Take it. No estate tax. Don't need the estate tax. I mean, is it crazy, or am I the one who sees this as crazy? Because it's one of those moments in time where you go, you're losing me. You're absolutely losing me. And speaking of something that's absolutely losing me, Paul LePage, the governor of Maine, has, and again, this is one of those moments where you go, I don't understand the thought process behind it. I don't understand why you would say, no, you know what, I don't really want the $9 million in federal funding to come into my state. That would help, with job training for older workers. Because understand, through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, they have career centers. The idea of WIOA is to create a one-stop kind of unemployment, job training, services center. Pennsylvania is in the process of using their job centers in conjunction with community colleges and union apprenticeship programs to get people who are unemployed into job training, into services. It's supposed to it's supposed to streamline things and help people who have lost jobs or who are unemployed to get new skills. Because look, the future in this country, and I brought it up a little bit with Mike Crossy in the last hour. What's going to happen in this country is, and in my lifetime, the jobs that we've done for years, like, I drove a truck for years. In 10 years, a truck driving job is going to be almost impossible to find because there's going to be so many people looking for few jobs, especially in the long haul world. So I'm going to need to be retrained. The 20-year-old truck driver, the 25-year-old who's driving now, who in 10 or 15 years is going to be 40 years old, 45 years old maybe, what is he going to do? This is the idea. Behind this was the idea of how do we get these people training for the next career. And you've got LePage who's saying, nope, not going to do it. Not participating. It's wasteful. It's wasteful spending. Not doing it. And you've got the Republican Secretary of Labor saying, hey, this money's here for your people. This money's here to help you get your folks the job training they need. And yet, no, not going to do it. And the sad thing is, this is where government has to do this. And I've been saying this for a very long time. If the private sector refuses, which they do, it has to be the public sector that does it. And I've said for years, if the private sector isn't going to create enough jobs, you need to have the public sector who will be the employer of last resort. And, simultaneously as this article comes out with LePage, I come across the article at Forbes magazine that, points out headline, employers need to train their older workers too. And it goes into how employers, because this is actually stuff that's tracked by the Department of Labor. There's a reason you collect data. There's a reason that you put these onerous job-killing regulations on employers to find out what's what. So this task force on aging and of the American workforce in the Department of Labor issued a report that said that employers are training the workforce between the ages of 25 and 34 at an average of about 37 hours per year to do a better job, to keep up with technology, to learn this new software or whatever. They're investing in their workforce. They're 25 to 34-year-olds. Anyone over 55 has seen just 9 hours of training. Now, I would argue in this environment, especially with the workforce going forward, you probably need the older workforce to have a lot more hours to catch up on stuff that they've fallen behind on. And I think of my father-in-law who worked for a computer company, worked for a manufacturer who his job was to keep the computers up, and he knew the old computer backwards, forwards, upside down. They kept them around just long enough to make sure Y2K didn't take everything out, and then they sent him packing. Tough, goodbye, and did nothing to train him on the next generation of computers. It's not that he couldn't do it. He said he was old. We got young guys to come in and do the newfangled stuff. We don't have to spend as much money to get them to do the initial work. So they let his skills languish, and look, he tried. And then they just kicked him to the curb. And we see this replicated over and over and over. Age discrimination is supposed to be against the law in this country. Ha, good luck. Good luck enforcing that. Good luck finding an attorney to do it. I have a relative who was just forced out of a job because, you're kind of old. And she's like, who am I going to sue? Here's a couple of pennies, go away. And we're seeing this over and over again. Now, what's going on is you're seeing some of these think tanks and some of these organizations saying, no, look, what's going to happen is, and understand, the country is getting older. Older people are going to have to work longer because they're poor. They don't have the defined benefit retirement programs that their parents had. They're not going to be able to retire because the crappy 401ks that they were saddled with virtually have nothing in them. So, sorry, we're just going to nothing for you. Now, what they're saying is, look, at the end of the day, these old people are going to constitute a large portion of the workforce. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're planning by the year 2024 that my age group, me, who in that's 7 years, I guess a little bit older than me, the 65 to 74 group, just 8-10 years older than me, they're going to be working at a rate of about 55%. So that baby boom era group right there, that 65 to 74 group, 55% of them are going to be working, which means the turnover that they're expecting in an economy that's going to have a labor force that's expected to expand by just 5%, it's going to be tons of old people looking for jobs. And employers had better come around to the idea that, some of their old people are going to be hanging around. And you probably aren't going to be able to just kick them to the curb for being old, because this is now becoming one of those moments where it's going to become epidemic levels, especially as jobs continue to shrink, especially as the number of jobs and the type of jobs continue to go away. The older workforce is going to be hanging on. And again, we've done nothing to help move them along. To me, the idea of expanding Social Security, making it a little bit more robust, lowering the age for for Medicare. Those seem to me to be rational, sane ideas to get older workers into retirement, out of the workforce, and tighten up the labor pool so that you do have some rising wages. But, we're not going to do that stuff. Just not going to do it. And it's one of those crazy moments where as a country we're easily distracted. We're easily, the latest Trumpian thing grabs our attention. It is really, really very, very bizarre times. Anyway, today is our last show of the week. We're going to start our civil rights tour, a rebroadcast of our civil rights tour from today forward for the next 2 weeks. Next week we will be we'll be at the AFL-CIO convention in St. Louis. And for me, the interesting part of this, and I hope people will tune into our Twitter and YouTube channels, and because we're going to be popping in and out all day long with coverage of different interviews and different topics and issues and things that are going to go on throughout the entire convention. Because I think this convention, more than any in the past, is really vitally important. Because the ship is sinking. Once the Gorsuch torpedo is cast and the Janus case becomes law, you're going to see a lot of the labor involvement in progressive issues scaled back. You're going to see the labor movement in panic mode because they've been under attack for 30 years. This is a huge, huge attack. And the question is which direction does the labor movement go? Do they go more insular, pro-business, insurance company, AARP model, or do they become a much more militant CIO roots kind of old school in the streets kind of model? Or will we see more factions? To me, the interesting part in all of this, and I would love to hear your thoughts, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, and follow us on Twitter @ricksmithshow. Again, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of that stuff. Because, at the end of it, what happens at these conventions, you go, well, the labor movement, they're dead and gone. They're not influential. Yeah, they still are. They're still relevant because they're still pushing for better wages, hours, conditions. They're still pushing for better laws that'll increase minimum wages and job protections and all of that stuff. For me, what comes out of this will signal what happens over the next decade. And this is where Democrats have to be held accountable. And this is where you reach out to Republicans. Because, look, the reality is a lot of union members are registered Republicans. And as I keep saying, please take the party back somewhere towards the world of sanity. Somewhere. I just you don't have to be north of the sane line, just somewhere near it. I mean, because there are so many issues, from immigration to health care, to education to infrastructure. This administration is, wow. I mean, so this convention to me it's that kind of important. Because it's going to highlight all of the issues that I think working people need to be facing, whether you're a union worker or not. What comes out of this convention and the policies that they pursue are important to all working people. Because, you go, how did we get an 8-hour workday? How did we get, insurance and pensions and worker protections? And, you go down the list. How did OSHA come about? How did, any of this stuff? Because people stood together. Because workers said there's only so much what I'm willing to eat. There's only so much that I'm willing to put up with. And, there's part of me that goes, what, we are honestly and truthfully at that moment where, there's only so much we're willing to eat. And, now is the time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here again.
been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial mysterious.